Hey guys, so I was unable to record a Kill Team Live for this week, so I figured I'd do a quick retrospective / discussion video about my top 5 best or worst changes that happened from Kill Team 2021 to Kill Team 2024. So just a quick preamble. I'm a very casual, I'm not a competitive player. I don't go around and fly out to tournaments around the world. I mostly play with my friends locally, people in my local game store. Overall, I definitely think that Kill Team 2024 has a better core rule set than 2021. Things have been streamlined, things have been clarified. All in all, the game's easier to teach and more fun to play. And most of my negative opinions are coming from things that are, I call auxiliary rules, so not part of the core rules, but things that we play on top, like the approved ops system. So let's get started into it. We're doing all the negative things first, and moving on to the positive things. The first thing is a kind of obscure rule, but you used to be able to take cover behind your friendly operatives. Now, I used to think this was a pretty flavorful mechanic, especially because the launch faction for that edition was Deathcore Krieg. So you can imagine, Imperial Guard troopers would definitely not have any bones about having themselves be body blocked to protect key people. Definitely, it was very cool. It allowed horde teams to push up through open areas of a map. So if you were playing on boards with low amounts of cover, which is a kind of a board design problem, you could actually use your own operatives as cover to move up the board, which is pretty cool. And it also kind of created a push and pull for blast. So if you wanted to use your own guys as cover, you could, but then because you had to be within 1 inch of your operatives, you would be exposing yourself to blast. So it's kind of like a push and pull. I like that, but now that's all gone. However, on the flip side, this was all negated by vantage shooting, so if you're getting shot by someone on vantage, you couldn't hide behind your guy's cover, and really this only was viable for horde teams because you didn't have the operatives to waste if you're playing more of an elite team. And again, this rule could come back as a faction rule. There's nothing really stopping this from coming back, but it's no longer in the core rules. Next up is a kind of a big sore point for me, the abandonment of Beta Decima. Now, as someone who collected that whole season and spent hours building and painting all the terrain, it's now kind of treated as an afterthought, which is really unfortunate. Really, it was cool because it allowed some teams that had mobility options, like the Void Dancer troop, or teams that had climbing ropes to get up and down, which is cool, and kind of an unseen gameplay area that wasn't really explored before, coming off of the close quarters of Into the Dark. And even in Approved Ops 2025, the printed version is kind of neglected too. If you notice, there was the map was not laid out correctly with an impossible to reach objective marker. Now, towards the end of that season, in Shadow Ops Nightmare, there was kind of some steps taken to address this, where they added swimming and diving, which allowed you to go in the hazardous areas, which is pretty cool. But again, there's really no way to save this. Shooting teams are way too powerful, and judging by how little people have adopted this in competitive play, clearly I think this was kind of an impossible design to make work in a fun aspect. Next up is the reduction of objective markers and the kill-off emphasis. So if you looked at missions in the last edition, they were in Improved Ops, or they call them Critical Ops, there were usually 6 objective markers. Now we're down to 3. What this means is that now, instead of having these different areas where you want to send your different operatives, everyone's kind of clustered around 3 objective markers, which creates fewer kind of conflict zones, and now everything is more, not centralized, but isolated to those 3 objective spots. And also, because you get rewarded directly for incapacitating your enemies, it makes it easier to score primary, because again, if everyone's concentrated on a few objectives, you clear them off, and you score primary easily. Now, this was kind of exacerbated because in the edition change, things got a little bit less lethal. Plasma lost AP2, and elites got tankier. So now you have fewer elite operatives contesting over fewer objectives and forcing you to engage them where they're able to wipe you out off objectives easier. And this was kind of evidenced because if you remember the early parts of this edition, elites were a pretty big problem. And even going into the current October 2025 meta, there has been some changes, but most elite teams have been nerfed in some way, and they're still pretty strong. Now, all this is tied to Approved Ops. This isn't really a problem with the core rules, but as most people play with Approved Ops, this is going to be what you're going to experience. And again, GW has taken steps to remedy this. They've taken steps to nerf elite teams. Next up is another one for me that I kind of felt bad about, was the removal of faction tac ops. So these were kind of flavorful tasks that you could put in your tac ops deck that fit each kill team. and they were cool because you could do different unique actions, and definitely felt more closer to the lore than more of the pure gameplay aspect. However, on the flip side, some of these are way too easy to accomplish. I remember lots of ones are basically free 2 points, and they're very difficult to balance across the roster because every faction had 3 of them. So 3 times, 20 plus, you have a lot of different faction tack-ups you have to balance. However, again, this is not really part of the core rules. They could come back in some form, and I'm kind of hope they do come back in the future in some way because they always felt really fun to do. And then lastly, the big one, the removal of Spec Ops and narrative. It was really fun to play Spec Ops and narrative. You can create a unique story for your team, make an awesome, background, and then kind of play that out as you develop your home base and level up guys. It was really cool, and also kind of like in full 40k Crusade mode, you can make pretty cool operative faction combinations with rare equipment and leveling up. It was really fun. Obviously, it wasn't perfectly balanced, but again, that's kind of the fun of a Crusade narrative-style gameplay. On the flip side, it took way too long to level up operatives. You were basically capped at 5 or so experience per game, judging just because you could only score it in such limited ways. And most of the Spec Ops are very similar. You look at the ones in the core book and even compare the ones that you have in your faction book, it's all very similar. Do 5 games of one, and then do 1 game of this, and then you get a little bit of bonus, either bonus experience, bonus equipment, yada yada. And we can tell there's potential with this because if you've played things like Ashes of Faith, or the Galadark explorations, or the Bay Despot infiltrations, which I played and they're really fun, you get a lot of cool leveling up gameplay over the course of a small series of games, which I really liked. But again, really, I think this is trying to put a square peg in a round hole. Kill Team might not be the right system for this. I know Necromunda exists, and it might be more tailored to that kind of narrative game. But let's go over to the positive things, and this is really, really easy to write because there are so many positive changes in the new edition of Kill Team. So the first thing is equipment changes. Oh man, do I not miss having to remember what guy I put my 1 grenade on. It's, that's just the easiest example. Now everything is on. Instead of having equipment points, you can just say you pick your equipment selections, and then now they're across your whole team. If they're limited, you can use them once per turn or 2 times per turn, whatever the rule is, but it's a lot easier to have that than managing, every single marker on every single guy. And then on top of that, the universal equipment is fantastic. It covers most of your generic options, which is good. And then now, because you have all those generic options covered, you can have really cool and unique faction equipment. Now, my one kind of gripe with equipment is there's kind of a bit of an ambiguity between the physical equipment and the marker equipment. What I mean is that some things that are placed like markers, like mines, and there's some things that are placed like ladders and the barbed wire where they don't really have markers, and it's kind of weird, and smoke grenades too, where you kind of have this not proper size, and it can be kind of weird to try to play it correctly, depending on what equipment you're using. Now, most of the time, you can just use the 20mm circle marker, but for some things like the mines or the barbed wire, they really don't have that option, which is kind of weird. Next up is the change to troopers. Now, previously, if you had a specialist that didn't really work in your particular scenario, you felt really bad swapping them for a trooper. Now they've given every single trooper a special rule, which is awesome because now it makes you want to change up your team, and you don't really feel bad when you're taking away specialists for a trooper, because sometimes your troopers might even be better than your specialists in certain situations, which is awesome. And the next up, and a really big one, is the changes to obscuring. So in the last edition, this was a pretty big pain point. I remember trying to teach people how to play the game, and they get caught out by obscuring a lot because it felt so weird to see. You're 2 inches away from a terrain, and suddenly you can't shoot them for some reason, even though they're pretty visible. And it made having a laser line really important because you wanted to make sure you were drawing those lines properly to make sure you weren't getting obscured, or to maybe, counter an argument of is this guy obscured or not. Now, it's all gone. And it's also, there's some scenarios where it could be asymmetrical, which is really weird. Now, it's a lot better. You can still shoot if something is obscured, you just lose your attack die and you can't get crits. However, in this edition, I don't have a specific example, but I've heard some people talking about it. There are still some rules jank where you can have models with large bases getting both obscured and cover. I know they've recently changed it so you can't get it from the same piece of terrain, but it is still possible in certain scenarios, and it's a bit weird. And second last, we have more and better weapon keywords. This is great. I love all the new weapon keywords they've added. Punishing, severe, accurate, great, simple, very well named, very simple. And now the cleaned up one, so no cover is now gone, replaced with saturate. Seek is great. Now you can say, oh, I have Seek this terrain type, which is awesome. Hot has been changed in a good way. Blast and Torrent have been simplified in ways that are great. And the removal of Fusillade. I don't know if anyone ever used this rule. It was mathematically horrendous. You basically never wanted to use it. It was a total downgrade, and I'm happy it's gone. I don't know why it even was made to begin with. However, on the flip side, there was a weird recent balance data slate change that made Severe not include punishing and rending, which feels kind of counterintuitive, where if you're resolving things naturally, where you think, oh, I can, change my thing to a severe and then use that to trigger something in the future. Apparently you cannot do that anymore, or you can only do it for certain things. It's just kind of weird. And lastly, the big one, removal of shape measurement. Now, if you've never played the last edition of Kill Team, instead of using things in inches, we had squares, circles, triangles, and the pentagons or hexagons. I believe it's a hexagon. You may even hear me see in some videos, I say, oh, this is a circle away, or a square away, or a hexagon away, or a stick away, just because that's how the things were done, and I'm a slow learner, and I kind of keep things in my brain a bit longer. But yeah, it was shapes instead of inches, and it was pretty arbitrary. You'd think like 1 inch, a shape with one side, like a circle, and then something with 3 inches, like a triangle, 3 sides. No, it was just all square, circles, triangles meant these things, and you had to learn it, and it was an extra layer. It's kind of weird. And it's kind of weird because we measure distances, and it's pretty intuitive. It's a natural life skill, and we do it in numbers and don't kind of assign shapes to it. It's kind of weird. And then also, it hamstrung design in certain aspects to avoid putting multiple shapes in the same distance measurement. Now, if you notice that most pistols in the last edition, they were 6 inches or hexagon distance away, because again, you didn't want to put, hexagon circle. And there were some rules that had like hexagon square for the 9 inches, but nowadays everything is written in inches. It's much cleaner. You can see that we have distances that are 8 inches, 9 inches, and it's very clean, and it makes sense. So I'm happy they've done that. And also you can see it on the operative movement distances as well. So we have operatives now that have 5, 6, or 7 inches of movement. Before, you had stuff that was 3 circles or was the normal, so you had lots of 6-inch movement. Sometimes you had things that were 4 circles that were fast. And then for some reason, these Hearthkin Salvagers, they had the 2 circles, 1 square movement for the 5 inches, and it was just really weird, but it's all gone. So yeah, that's kind of my quick little ramble video. In my opinion, the game is much better than the previous edition. Everything's been cleaned up in ways that I like. Everything that I've kind of complained about is mostly nitpicks, and can probably be resolved if there's more work put into it. But yeah, if you have any thoughts, things that I missed, just shoot in the comments. Be good to hear your feedback, and catch you guys in the next episode of Kill Team Live.